Alrighty then, give me just a second here. And popping out the chat so I can see it. Yes, this is another live one, not a pre-recorded like last night. Alright, and that means... Yep. Another painting episode. More orcs. Yay! And more Shinju. Yes. And now we're just waiting for people to show up so I can start talking and doing what I was doing. Okay. This is not good. Now, what's happening here is I am preparing to paint both of these figures' faces. These faces, well, I think it's pretty obvious. You know, well, let me go ahead and hold on and put you mute for a second. Anyway, I'm right now going ahead and getting some words out here. And self-promotion, paint some Orky faces. And hopefully we will be back here in just a few minutes. We'll have some people in here to actually talk to. And now you'll notice that both of these, unlike last time, were primed in Goblin Green. Pretty much the spray version of this shade. It doesn't look exact because you've got the white plastic of the bottle in the way. I primed them with this, you know, Army Painter Goblin Green, and then I gave them a wash of this, which is Vallejo Game Ink Black Green ink. This gives me at least a basic shading and the wrinkles and all of that. And again, that's slightly different from last time because despite the fact that the color is nearly identical, the spray has a slightly different surface pattern. It's not the same level of matte satin as the brush paint. Where did I put it? I set it down here just a second ago. Yeah, here it is. It doesn't have the same amount of matte and satin, you know, that here. So what ends up happening is it actually, let me pull this in closer. As you can see here, it's the ink stays shinier in the crevices, and it doesn't stick to the surfaces as much. So this basically means I don't have to go back with the second coat of the Goblin Green. And how you doing, William? Now, what I want to show you, I'm going to show you what I ended up doing with the faces on these guys. Oh, come on. There we go. You'll notice, well, it's not as extreme here, but the nose, cheek, and lips are a little bit redder than the green around them, while the chin itself is a little bit bluer. The reason for that is, well, blood flow. I'm going to use a paintbrush as a kind of a pointer here. You just grab one at random. Blood flow is deeper, or closer to the surface, on the nose, cheeks, and lip. Whereas around the chin and jawline, you've got what would be 5 o'clock shadow. And I'm going to assume that most orcs have blue-black hair. That kind of, the Superman blue-black. Just because, on the one hand, it can look more handsome, but it can also look a lot greasier. Like how Snape is described in the books, but not really displayed that way by Alan Rickman. But yeah, I'm going to do the skin on these guys, but I'm going to pay attention to the face, and I'm going to show you how I detailed those back over there. And yes, this does mean I'm going to do one at a time. This is the primitive bow. The previous archers I've done were using what I'm calling the advanced bow. And yes, I've added some little army painter tufts to the bases. To be exact, the Wasteland tufts from their Battlefields XP series. You just peel one off with a pair of tweezers, place it where you want it, and then use something like, well, I use a little eyeglass screwdriver just to pat it down and make sure that the adhesive is all over the base. And really and truly, when it's on the base, the individual hairs have less adhesion to the core base than the core base has to the miniature base. So it's really not coming off, not unless you rip it off. Okay, but like I said, what we're going to do, we're going to start off the dry brush of Scaly Hide. Yes, I am using Army Painter paints. That's because until I run out of these, I want to get every dime that I got. And it's not a bad paint. It may not be the best paint in the world, but it's not a bad one. And it's relatively cheap, so more people can get it. And once again, you shake it until you can hear that agitator. And you keep shaking it a little bit longer. Flipping it upside down and right side up every so often. Now, since I am dry brushing, I am not thinning the paint. Just going to put a few drops in here. Let's say 3 should be enough for me to be able to dry brush both figures. Whoa, as I knock over the paint. I'm going to put it back in here. Alright, now I have a lot of brushes over here, and I've got several that are really good for dry brushing. Some of them used to be my brush of choice, and now, and now they've kind of degenerated to being a dry brush. Oh yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of the Viejo paints. I mean, this is what I'm going to be using later. Game Color Wash by Viejo. Actually, is this by Viejo? Yeah, Acrylics Viejo, right there. I got a lot of them. In fact, about half of my paints are Viejo. Anyway, we're going to dip the brush in the paint. I got a piece of paper down here, and we're going to wipe most of the paint off, and then for further effect, I bring it between those 2 knuckles. And then we're just going to start dry brushing the whole of the skin. Now, the main reason why I primed this one and the other with the Goblin Green instead of using the black that I used, or gray that I used on the others, is because these are Savage Orcs. Almost all of their figure is in some way skin. It's also a good idea to do heavier dry brushing up near the head, or heavier highlighting if you're using that technique, simply because your head is more likely where the attention of the person looking at your figure is going to go. Oh yeah, his spear is basically a short sword tied to a stick. Now, I'm just going to do a full, nice, heavy dry brush across the entirety of what flesh is visible, which is a significant amount compared to the average orc here. And we're going to go over the belly. Yeah. Got to be very careful when it comes to the fingers. Want to make sure we don't accidentally get anything in the gaps between the fingers. The same thing applies to the back of the hand, where it's got the what's the word I'm looking for? It's got the tendons. Yes, that's it. I have a tendency to occasionally forget words. Yay, getting older. Now, since this is just I'm considering this to be a tabletop level, not a display level, so I'm not going to do a lot of advanced techniques here. It just washes and dry brushes. Okay. And one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we got everything. Every part of this guy. That's going to be flesh. Now you'll notice he looks a bit less saturated. A little bit kind of almost teal. That's the lighting. Okay. Put him aside. Bring him out. And we're going to do the same thing over here. Get a whole bunch of paint, put it into the brush, wipe most of it off, and then just start dry brushing. Notice I'm pulling from the top down for this particular figure. That's because we want the top to be lighter and the bottom to be not quite as light. I'm also going side to side. Now here's another one with pauldrons. This is the primitive pauldrons. They're basically sticks tied together. And we're going to brush over the fingers and the back of the hand. I missed some flaws from the resin supports. I didn't get it fully cleaned. So this sucker will only ever be seen like that, so you can't see those flaws. And once again, dry brush it, wipe off, and then come down across the fingers, and the back of the hand, and the thumb, and the palm, and then we're going to get to the legs. Make sure a base for them. Alright, now, just rinse off the brush. Now, I do still have my 2 separate cups of water, because I will probably be continuing to paint these 2 after the show. Speaking of painting, if I can't work up a patron for tonight, then I will be sculpting, quote-unquote, the ideal painting practice miniature. What that means, I will be sculpting a miniature you can print that has skin, hair, sheet metal, like armor, a sword, wood for a shield, chainmail, and cloth. And then that will let you be able to practice all of those myriad different materials. Oh, and leather, because it'll have a pouch, a leather pouch in that, and a gem in the center of this belt. Now, for the ultra highlight, the really high parts, I'm mixing 2 drops each of the Army Painter Jungle Green, which is a really bright neon green, and Necrotic Flesh. The reason for this is, technically, Necrotic Flesh would be the next step up from the Scaly Hide, but it's a bit grayer. I wanted to give it a little bit more color back in by putting it into the highlight. There we go. I'm also putting in just a single drop of the Army Painter Pale Yellow, which is called Moon Dust. That's just to make it a little bit lighter while still keeping that kind of yellowy tinge that we're giving it. One thing about painting in batches, your orcs won't all have exactly the same skin tone. This is actually a good thing, because what that means is there'll be a slight variation between them. As long as you're making the same basic decisions, as long as it has the same basic palette, it's all good. Now, we're going to come down. And we're going to come down. We're going to come across the ear. We're going to double check on the brow and cheek. We're going to give a little bit on top of the head. And top of the ear. Alright. Now just to show you, it's got a nice sharp level of detail there already. Let me go ahead and turn that off. Okay. Didn't work good. Let's see how I'm trying to get a good shot that doesn't. Well, that's not good. I'll figure out how to do it in a minute later. But the fact is, it's got a much brighter highlight on top of the eyebrows now, on the nose, and the top of the cheeks, and the lip. Then we're going to dry brush across the fingers again, this time a lot lighter, to really emphasize the division between them. And then we're only going to dry brush across areas that are really upmost, the highest peak parts, like top of the back here, and the top of the shoulders, and the top of the legs. We're also going to dry brush across the top of the stomach. We're going to do a little bit heavier Just simply because this is a goofy little orc. So we have the orc looks a lot less pale than he did. In fact, let's go ahead and compare them side by side. Okay. See, the problem is this webcam really isn't capturing exactly what I need it to capture. Let me go ahead and pull up just one of the critters. Let's pull up the Green-Tide Savage. Now, as you can see, the Green-Tide Savage picture there is pretty close to what it ends up looking like when it's actually painted. You can see how the brows are a lot more yellow. Same thing with the top of the ears. It's just this camera isn't doing really well at showing that. Let me see what happens if I play around with some of the camera settings. Let's turn off auto white balance as it turns my miniature gray. Nope. Turn it on. Let's turn on the color intensity. There we go. Oh, let's go back to here and turn off HDR. Okay. Now when we compare the, oh, let me remove Mr. Orky, move up here. There, it's a lot more visible that this guy's head is a lot more yellowy. You've got that brighter color now than guy. But it's time to make him a bit brighter. But yeah, having different shades for different orcs is always a good thing, simply because it lets you, gives them variety and makes them look more like individuals, and it lets the uniform be what unites them. In this case, the purple kilt. I could have been crude and called it something ruder, but I decided not to. So we're going to emphasize the brows, the cheekbones, the nose, and the lip. We are not going to do a darn thing to the chin with this bright color. Top of the ears, and then top of the back, and then the hands. We're going to bring it lightly down across the top of the fingers, kind of focusing on where the knuckles are. But for tabletop level, that's not really important. Come across the back of the hand and the top of it, top of the arm here, and on the back of the hand here, we're going to dry brush a bit. And on the inside of the hand, we're going to dry brush it a bit. Again, starting at the top, so as I go down, there's less paint on the brush. On the thumb and on the palm. Now, he has a bit more neck visible and a bit more chest visible, since all he has going across his chest is a belt. So we're going to kind of do a little bit there. Once again, we're going to dry brush across the top of the belly, and just a very faint dry brush across the back. Now, dry brush a little bit more on top of the leg, which will bring back some of that yellow into the green, and top of this leg, which for the same purpose. Okay. Now, the good thing is, dry brushing takes almost no time at all to dry. So, the next thing we're going to do is not dry brushing. I have 3 different red inks. I've got the Viejo Game Ink Red, I have the Army Painter Quick Shade Red Tone. Oh, let me go ahead and turn that off. And I have the Viejo Game Color Wash Red Wash. All 3 of these are different. Further proof I need to get a new... Yeah. The Game Ink Red Ink. On focus. Game Ink Red Ink is exactly that. As you can see from this bottle, it is incredibly bright red. Its best use by itself is as a glaze, especially over top of something like a zenithal highlight. We're going to be using it for a different purpose here. The Army Painter Quick Shade Red Tone darkens, but it doesn't do much to the surface color. It's great for shading over existing reds, but it in and of itself does not do much to change the color. And finally, the Lavado Rojo, or Red Wash, yeah, come on, there we go, the Red Wash, which is in some ways in between the two, but it's much darker than the regular red ink, and that's going to darken what we want to do a bit too much. So I'm going to kind of mix them. I want the deep recesses to be darker, so we're going to start off with 1 drop of the red tone. We're going to give a little bit of this just because it's got a nice, rich, purpley red. We want to use this to kind of tint the color just a little bit. Now, I'll say this, I do not know how Carroburg Crimson would do by Games Workshop. I have never experimented with it. And then a little bit of regular bright red. Now, we're going to use a small brush for this because we want it to be just where we put it and only where we put it. So I'm pulling out what's called a 10-aught spotter. I'm going to mix all this up because considering they're all liquids, it's just a mixing of liquid. You don't need to scrub or anything. Test it on my palette. It's a little too strong. Now I can add in some drops of my wash mixture, or I can just put in a little bit of water. Well, and then I forget that this is a teeny tiny brush and doesn't hold any, so what the heck, let's just throw in a drop or 2 of wash. Now, as I said, this is, out of 20, it's 12 parts water, 7 parts matte medium, and 1 part flow aid. The matte medium helps keep it from losing intensity, and the flow aid helps keep it from coffee staining, making the ring around the top of the puddle. Now, let's mix that in. I put 2 drops in, by the way, which means there's still more ink than wash mixture in here, and that's much better. And I'm just simply going to take it a little bit. I'm going to wash inside the eye sockets in addition to what I'm doing, because he will have red eyes, and we want those eyes to really stand out. Now I'm going to wash across the nose. I'm going to tint it slightly redder. And the same thing for the cheek area. Now if it looks too strong when you do it, just rinse your brush and brush lightly across the top of the area that you're working on. Because what that'll do is that'll make it drift away from that top part. Then we're going to take and go across the lip, lower lip. Not the upper lip, only the lower lip. We're also going to go ahead and make a kind of heavy coat of this in this open mouth, around where the teeth would be, and in general in the open mouth. Especially kind of near the top. Okay, now, right now, fiddle. Come on. Oh, come on, stupid camera. Alright, there we go. And then we move it in. And you can see it's got slightly redder tint on the nose, cheeks, and lower lip. That's all we want, is a slightly redder tint. Now again, some of these orcs may end up with a redder nose, cheek, and lip. Some may end up with a grayer nose, cheek, and lip. Now the reason why the brow we made brighter is simply because the brow needs to be brighter. We're not going to be painting over it. Okay. And then we're going to pull across the lower lip. And then we hit this and drain away some of the excess in the mouth. Okay. Now, once again, this was a very thin coat that we still managed to get some further red tint into the lip, the nose, and the cheek. Next up, well, we have the chin, and we need to make that bluer. Now, the reason blue is because if we used a black to simulate a 5 o'clock shadow, it would just simply look like dark green. Blue will change the tint. So what we're looking for here, what did I put? Easy thing is these things have a red cap, so it's easy to find them. Blue tone. Army Painter Blue Tone is literally what we need for this. As I turn my palette so I have a different, we're actually only going to put 1 drop in. Just 1. The Army Painter Blue Tone is, like the red, intended more for painting shades over existing blue. It doesn't, it tints a little, and it darkens. So we're going to be kind of careful with this. And the best thing to do is start from just in front of the ear, come down in front of the chin, and come back, and then come down from the other side. Basically, where the average man grows beard. If you don't believe that orcs have beards, well, you can use some other shading technique. But what this does, this ends up tinting. Let me one more. Yeah. It looks more extreme right now than it will when it's done. But the end result is it looks more of a caricature, which really and truly most orcs, especially this facial style, are caricatures. But it gives it life. It makes it less flat, dull green everywhere. And we're going to do it to this guy. And on this guy, because of cracks in the primer, it actually might end up looking even more like a 5 o'clock shadow and less like just a tinting. And then once again come back up and then in front of the ear. And again, the difference is not as great as it looks. Now we need to let these actually sit and rest, because the next step is the eyes. And in order to do the eyes, we need to make sure that the ink that we put into the eye sockets is fully dry. Also, to do the eyes, I need to get out, where is Army Painter Pure Red, and where is Army Painter Crusted Sore. This is not an effects paint despite the name. The blood effects paint from Army Painter is glistening blood, and they have effects printed across the bottom. This is just a really dark, rich red. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead to each of these. I'm going to make sure that this brush is a little bit damp. Just stick it in the water and then just get a little bit off. And make sure that I'm going to tap it inside the eye socket just a little bit to get rid of any potential excess paint, or ink rather. I'm going to do the same thing here. I mean, as I held it there, that's because that eye socket had a lot of red. Okay, now we rinse off the brush. Now, I'll start with the Crusted Sore. Now, I'm not going to put this into one of the divots on my, good old-fashioned plastic divot palette. Instead, I'm just going to put a tiny little dab on one of the flat areas. Not even a full drop, because I don't need it to make 4 eyes. Then, yes, I'm alive. Put a little bit onto that brush. Twist it on the paper, just a little bit. You notice I'm holding it by the handle, and I then brace my hand against the handle and my other hand, and very carefully paint in some of this crested sore into the eye socket. I could turn it upside down, or I could just be very careful again. In fact, I'm going to have to bring this way to see a little bit better. Okay. So we have dark red eye sockets right now on him. We're going to do the same thing to him. Not just where the eye is, but a little bit around it, just to make sure that we have it covered. The reason being is this helps the eye get a little bit of look of glow to it. Especially in this socket where he's got his eye kind of winced closed. Now, the next thing that's going to go on there is actually a special paint. It is from the Game Color Extra Opaque line, Heavy Orange. It's actually, the best way to describe the color is it's kind of what happens if you mix flesh tone and orange. It's not quite a true orange. But let's go ahead and shake it till we hear that agitator, flipping it occasionally. And once again, we're going to put just a tiny little dab on the palette, not even a full drop. Okay, and I dropped the paint. But yeah, the actual color of this ends up, like I said, it's a mix between orange and flesh tone, but it's exceptionally opaque. Now, I'm not going to be thinning this. We're going to be painting this on the sharpest brush we've got, only where the eye will be. And then here. Now, we look at him closely. He's already looking like he's got glowing red eyes. But those eyes are not red, they're orange. We come back to him. And the time it takes us to paint his, those will be dry. Well, it's always good to paint at least two figures at once, even if they got totally different colors. Okay, having screwed up just then, I just go back to the dab of crusted sore and paint over what I just did. Now, very carefully. Right now there's a problem that the wet paint is giving me highlights that are confusing me for what was painted on just then. So I gotta wait a minute. Okay. Now, Once again, set this aside, pull this one out, and now we're going to the pure red. We're going to be painting the... Okay, the opaque, the heavily opaque, reddish orange, fleshy tone. There it is. Vallejo Game Extra Opaque Heavy Orange. Naranja Denso. Yeah. Now, we're going to take that pure red, shake it up, shake it up, shake it. It is impossible for me to hear that song without picturing The Rock. Now, and let's just put, once again, just a tiny little dab, not even a full drop, on a flat spot of the palette. As I just had a couple fuzz butts back over there in the curtains cause problems with each other. Alright, now we're going to get the red wet. We're going to dip that brush into the red. We're going to brush it off. We're going to very carefully try to paint right over where we put the heavy orange. And maybe a little bit around it. The end result is that while we're not making a very bright red, its presence in this really dark eye socket and a nice sharp divisor provided by the heavy orange gives us a nicely bright red pair of eyes. Yeah. Once again, this is not, it doesn't look as saturated and as different as that image showed. Now back to him. We're going to have to do some extra work with him on his face that we wouldn't on that guy's. Now, once again, just a very careful red right over top of the heavy orange, a little bit beyond. In this case, I'm going to hold him up, paint him from this way. And you notice that I got my paintbrush hand braced against the hand that's holding the miniature. That's for stability. And we have our nice bright red eyes. I'm going to have to touch up underneath this eye socket, but otherwise it's looking pretty good. Now, don't be me. When you get, if you do what I do and use like one of these with some sticky stuff on it for your paint handle, don't get this brand. The Scotch mounting putty isn't sticky enough, and it's too rubbery. There's an entire line of exceptionally wrong one, of these exceptionally opaque game extra opaque paints. I mean, I also have a well, I haven't used it in a while. It's starting to separate. Extra opaque heavy ochre, and then there's a line of more transparent paints that would be a good idea to use, for example, with the glaze mix that I've got, but it's still within the model color line, but it's transparent blue, transparent this, transparent that. It'd be good for glazing things with a given color. Inks do tend to work a little bit better for me. Okay, now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to paint the teeth. We're not going to pick them out. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and find a medium brown, no, medium light tan. Let's use the, where is it? Yeah, this will do. This is simply game color khaki. And we're gonna put a drop on the palette. We're actually going to start off and pick off the teeth on our archer dude because he only has his 2 tusks. And again, we're going with that really fine tip brush. Grabbing some paint, and then we're just going to paint the entirety of the tusk. On both sides, both tusks. Make sure, because of the shape, make sure you get the back side of the tusks too. Okay, that's the tusks, given a bit of a tan, a khaki color. And khaki isn't tacky. Now, we're going to go ahead and paint up his tusks with this khaki. And here. Now, we're going to go ahead and pick out. Okay, certainly. Christopher, one good option. After I finish going ahead and picking out their teeth, I'll go into it. But there's also, we could also discuss this in the Patreon, in the Discord, and so on. But I will cover that on the show. Now, I could use matte white for the tips of these teeth, but these are orcs. That would look too unnatural. So instead, what I'm going to use, if I can find it, because I've got quite a few paints out here. I have skeleton bone, but I'm looking for another paint from Army Painter. It's called Mummy Robes, and it actually would end up being the best option here because it's lighter than the skeleton bone, but not as light as white. And here we have Mummy Robes. It's actually more of an ivory color than the skeleton bone is. Now, if these tusks were much larger, I'd phase through that skeleton bone from the khaki, but these are teeny tiny teeth. And once again, less than a droplet onto the palette. Okay. Because the less paint you put on your palette, the better. I'm not like some of those YouTube painters out there that slather the paint on the palette. Now, I'm just going to pick out the top of the teeth. And then I'm going to wet my brush, just a little bit of water, and just going to stroke down and back up again. Stroke. The final stroke is always towards the top of the tooth. Okay, I'm going to do a bit of on-the-tooth blending because it dried too quickly. There we go. And his face is done. Again, it's harder to see here than it will be when I take the photograph. He looks like he's got scars on the side of his face because I went a little bit too heavy with the primer and the paint cracked on his cheeks. Now, this guy. Now with him, we're actually going to put a little drop of water on it into this paint because we're going to need to get a lot more subtle on the teeth inside that mouth. We're going to start off with the top of each tusk. Actually, I need to have a set where I put the darn thing. I need to put a second droplet. There. I put too much water on it. Now, top of the tusk. And then we're going to pick out the tops of the teeth. I just did something no one should do. And if you screw up, wet brush, you can literally erase what you just did. And then drain away the water you just put on there. Because I just got a little bit too white, too close to the base of the one tusk. Now, I'm going to pick out the teeth again, but not as close to the base. And then down here. And there. And then we go down to the bottom teeth. Okay. And there's them teethies. Now there's one last thing to do on these guys, and not all orcs have it, but both of these guys have hair. This guy has a mohawk, this guy has a top knot. However, let's go ahead, put these down, turn that off, and go to a brief intermission as I move my camera back to the top of my monitor, and then make sure that it's pointed in the right way. Okay, there we go. Oh, whoa. A bit too much contrast there. A bit too much color intensity. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So, Christopher, you wanted to know about the Patreon. Yes. What can you do? Alright, what the Master includes It includes one sculpt that I do on a broadcast on Sundays, either the 1 o'clock show like this one, or the 8 o'clock show this evening. It includes optional, if you want, I print out your figure and mail it to you. Cat not included. And then there are files for the Do you mind? Can I put you down on the floor now, please? Yeah, little buddy. Go on down. Get on down, little buddy. Good boy. Anyway, there are files. What these files are, I'm going to have to open up the program that they're involved in, and while that's opening, I'm going to discuss it. There is a freeware program called Daz Studio. Daz Studio is explicitly aimed at hobbyists for the sole purpose of, well, hobby-level rendering. And by hobby-level rendering, I mean everything from, well, making your own webcomics to, and it's still, what's going on with this camera? It suddenly went really super, anyway. Everything from making your own webcomics, making character portraits for your player characters, or even brief animations. But what I use it for is I created a basic human figure. Okay? Now, to show it to you, here it is. This is part of what you get in, or actually, I gotta do one further thing. Some of these modifiers are not included. That is the base male figure. Now, what we get is, because of the way that this program rigs models, I was able to take my original geometry figure, and not only is it able to be, articulated and posed, but it also, I can do things like this. Turn it into a dwarf. Turn it to an elf. Turn it into an orc. Heck, even a dragonborn. I can take that figure and I can make it even more muscular. And so on and so forth. Now, I am not including all of the morphs that I've created, all of the blend shapes that I've created. Once I have the character in the blend shape that I want, let's say I want to make him just straight up Dragonborn, then I can load in props. For example, let's give him a simple, let's give him the, a mace. Let's put it in his right hand. Now watch his right hand. Okay. I'm going to actually bend the arm. So when we watch this right hand, when I load it in, not only did it load in exactly where the hand was, it posed the hand around it. Bam, 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 bam. And so then I want to add in, you want him to be wearing a tunic, so I go on here to clothing. I have the tunic skirt. I make sure that he is selected, and I click the tunic skirt. Now, when I can then pose him, which I've got some pre-made poses In his left hand, let's make it a torch. And we can rotate. So that he's sitting there holding a torch in front of him. Or I can then grab this tool and pull his hand out like that. Then twist it a little bit so that it's more upright. And then a little bit more side to side. All right, let's do it at the elbow. We unbend it a bit more so that the fire is kind of tilting. He is posed. He is in a basic shape with his props and kilt. I would then hide the torch and the skirt, and then one by one export them out as an OBJ file. Okay. Let me go ahead and pop back here. Now, there are a lot of props included, but they are very basic props. Part of the whole thing behind this whole show is teaching people how to make their own props. And there's a lot of episodes where I will make a prop right then and there on the show to show you how I make them. I have to open up that file to see let's see. When it comes to the morphs, you're getting a male and a female figure, by the way. The male includes the more muscular morph, dragonborn, dwarf, elf, gnome, and halfling, plus a goblin and an orc. Other things include well, the female form has the dwarf, elf, gnome, halfling, and then a couple morphs to adjust the general build. You know, a little bit more hippie, a little bit less hippie, a little bit more buxom, a little bit less buxom, and so on. When it comes to props and clothing bits, there's a quiver on the back, quiver on the hip, a heater shield, which is the cliche, you know, round at the top and then coming down like what you see on coat of arms. Round shield. Spells coming from linked from the hand, like an arcane bolt and a fire bolt. Sword, auto pistol, back shield, back sword. 2 different backpacks. Beaked axe, beam sword, crude bow, fancy recurve bow, and a regular recurve. A breastplate, which it's actually not a breastplate. What it is, it's a prop to smooth out the chest so that when you sculpt, you can make your own breastplate. Claymore, cloak, club, crossbow, cutlass, dagger, falchion, long hair, robe bottom, tunic bottom, flail, Gauss rifle, glaive, great axe, great club, great sword, couple great swords actually, or is it? No, just one great sword. Halberd, hand axe, harp, heavy rifle, helmets, several helmets, a dagger on the hip, horn on the hip, sword on the hip, hip plates for the male and female, Hollywood-style scimitar, horn being held, horseman's hammer, las pistol, not a Warhammer style, just a basic little sci-fi laser pistol, placed on the legs, longsword, lute, mace, maul, morningstar, orb for spellcaster types, pauldrons, quarterstaff, rapier, ray gun, the more ray gun gothic style, not the a self bow, just a very basic simple bow, a sensor pod, holding Captain, I'm detecting strange things here. short braid that you can put anywhere and use for any purpose. You put it in his beard, put it on the back of the head. Short sword, shotgun, sickle, and spear. Great spear. Spell shield, which is, holding a hand out and you got his big disc in front of it. Submachine gun, torch, trident, an uncast spell, which is a massive, and you can tweak it to look like fire or lightning when you sculpt. Trident, Viking sword, warhammer, wizard staff, 3 different types of horns for the dragonborn, tusks for the half-orc and full orc, a tail similar to a lizard man that you could use, for example, with tieflings, and combine that tail, and there's a set of tiefling horns, orc tusks, and a ponytail. Just stick it back there, stick it on top of here. Don't give yourself a concussion like I just did. All of that is included in the files. He's preparing the figure for sculpting. You would do, if you go back and if you look at any of my previous videos where I actually sculpt the miniature, you can see exactly how I handle that. Meanwhile, go ahead and straighten up little Furball's towel. When she gets back from dinner, she's gonna be, I don't want her to be too put out. Okay. Now tonight I will be sculpting a miniature at the 8 o'clock show. And what I'll be doing for that is I'll be doing what I consider to be the ideal practice painting piece. I do this when I've got my tablet in my hand. Even more cloth skirt coming out from underneath the chainmail. So you've got, and then a shield on his left hand and a sword in his right. So that you have the opportunity to paint. Oh, and he'll be standing on planks. So you got the opportunity to paint plate steel, chainmail, wood, cloth, flesh, fur. I do not think there are any ZBrush discounts right now. I do not know. What are you doing? I do know that there is ZBrush Core, which has about 75 to 95% of what I use in it. It just has a limit on maximum number of brushes, maximum number of polygons, and some of the Z-modeler tools and that are no longer part of it. What are you doing? Yeah, I haven't tried Blender on the new computer yet. Get down, little fuzz. No. No, little fuzz. Get down. But on the old computer, it caused it to crash twice within 15 minutes. So I'm kind of hesitant to use Blender on the new computer. Yay. See, I've never had Mesh Mixer crash. I've also almost never had ZBrush crash, even during the few builds where it was prone to it. Autosaves are your friend. I had a broadcast saved by a ZBrush autosave. I almost never have ZBrush crash, but when it does it live. But yeah, I had a ZBrush autosave saved an entire broadcast. Whew. Anyway. Okay. Christopher, are you familiar with the project I've been working on? Why I'm showing people how to paint orcs? No. Yeah. See, that really... This is how he'll look across the battlefield. You can pick out the eyes easily. Well, this eye needs some work. I need to go back in and tweak this eye a little. But the teeth are pretty sharp and clear. You can see the difference in shading on the cheeks and nose and lip. Yeah. The fingers are clear. It's clear that those are fingers and not just a mitten. But yeah, what I'm doing is I am making an entire horde. Not by sculpting and printing several dozen figures. No. You know, Mr. Dude there. But rather by you know, but I didn't sculpt each one of these individually. Yeah. Instead, what I did was I created multiple different torsos, legs, arms, heads, optional shields, optional shoulder pads, and even riding boars. Yes, boar cavalry. So basically, it's a mix and match enough to make almost an entire army. That's what I've been working on. Okay. Yeah, I need to trim my stash and shave over here. Anyway, but yeah, what the master includes, it includes the files for DAZ Studio, so you can pose my base geometry to sculpt your own figures on. And yes, as long as you decimate the final result to a point where it cannot extract the original geometry, like I tend to do at the end, I'll give it a Dynamesh and then a decimation. And most programs nowadays have something akin to decimate. As long as you... come on. As long as you decimate the final product so that you can't extract the original geometry, you can do what you want with them. There's at least one small Kickstarter of undersea stuff that did that with the geometry of the figures that I made, and it's perfectly fine. But you got the figures. You've got a patron sculpt, where I will schedule a 1 or 8 o'clock episode of this show, and I will, with you in the audience, give me asking questions on occasion, we sculpt your figure, and I'm an optional at your discretion. I print it out and send it. You also gain access to the Patron File Vault on Discord, which currently has a shield, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31 figures. Yeah, 31 figures, a shield, and the Tarrasque. Yes, if you become a patron, you gain access to the Tarrasque. Just to show you the particular critter that I'm talking about. That would be, come on, there's this sucker. Boom. Kaboom. Really and truly, the snake hook, you can get a very similar effect to snake hook if you take the move brush and give it one of those conical alphas. So stretch out. You just can't curve with it. As for how long my prints tend to take, I use a resin printer. I mean, right now I'm in the middle of transitioning. Uh-oh. Hello? That was a friend of mine calling in late to work and hitting the wrong button on his contact list. But, like I was trying to say, right now I'm kind of transitioning from green resin to totally clear. I mean, this is one of the other figures. Yeah. But individually, if I printed them one at a time with a clear resin, which takes less curing time than a opaque resin, I would probably say that it would take, like, I don't know, I could do it in about 3 hours, 2 hours. But again, with you can actually no about 4 hours at a 0.35 layer height, 0.035. But you can print 4 or 5 at a time. It's 2 or 3 if they're really big. It's all how many can you cram on there, because the time of resin printer doesn't matter how complex the layer is, just how high it totally is, because it flashes the entire layer at once. I think ZBrush Core is about 180 right now. But there is in fact a Wacom tablet that comes with ZBrush Core that costs $200. So for effectively $20 more, you're getting a full Wacom Pro tablet and ZBrush and one other program. So you might want to take a look. I know that that's actually in the stores at Best Buy. And the difference between using a mouse and using the tablet is like the difference between a rattle can and an airbrush. There's so much more you can do. So much more control. You can do more subtle things. You can do quick little little strokes like that you can't really do with a mouse. Yeah. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Yeah. This is my baby girl. She's 13. Yes, this dynamic little, perfectly healthy little sweetheart is 13 years old. Yeah. Anyway, it's now almost 2:30. Does anyone have any other questions? Keeping in mind there is about a 10 or 15 second lag on YouTube, not counting the, well, I'm pointing at the drop frames in XSplit. Not counting the drop frames, because ZBrush tends to do I'm not YouTube tends to do this at about this time of day. It's not the best time to stream, but I kind of still do. Yeah. What you doing? What you doing? Yes. See, how many cats do you know that let you pet their belly like that? Yeah. You gonna play? Yeah. Lick, 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 lick. And if I move my hand right now, she'd lunge out and grab it. Now, come on. Enough. Enough play. Yeah. Well, any questions? I think the one at Best Buy is the one that includes ZBrush Core. What I would recommend doing is, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to poke my head over at the Wacom website and double check on that, because I know when they announced ZBrush Core, they announced that it would come with certain versions of the Intuos. So, alright. Where is it? It says Seymour. Certifications, what's included? Alright, that's just the Pro. I would recommend that when you decide on what Intuos you're going to get, if you do get one, choose a size based on what you're used to doing. Okay? Alright. Intuos. There's the regular Intuos, and then there's the Intuos Pro. I'm looking at the page. Alright. Three different creative software. Okay, it does not include it does not include ZBrush Core anymore. All right, that's a letdown. Let me see if I can find into a ZBrush. Let's see if it's on the ZBrush site. Alright. So we Google Wacom and ZBrush Core bundle. Okay. The Intuos 3D Creative bundle. That's not it. Wacom bundle, how to get the copy of ZBrush Core. Here we go. On Amazon. It's showing up.
Intuos 3D is the combination.
That's a video short. I don't want a video short on Amazon. I want the... Let's see if it's on the Pixelogic website. Okay. All products. There we go. And hold on just a second. Okay. It's looking like it's looking like they may no longer have the bundle with the ZBrush Core in the US. So yeah, that's old news apparently. So yeah, it's apparently no longer available in the US. Sorry. Douche, what you doing? So yeah, I could not find it myself. The products that are available with the Intuos now are all 2D. They're all art programs, not ZBrush or 3D sculpting programs. However, as has been said, in addition to Blender, there's also Sculptress on the free side. ZBrush Core by itself is $180. Now, the thing to remember about ZBrush is it's a perpetual license. I bought ZBrush at about ZBrush 3. Every single update since then, since the mid-2000s, has been free. I'm on ZBrush 2019, and I got it free because I have the perpetual license from when I bought it, almost 15 years ago. Compare that to the fact that I'm still using 3D Studio Max 2011 because they went to a subscription service and I can't afford it. And I had to upgrade to the newest version of Photoshop CC because, number one, they no longer support the older versions. Number two, my DVDs or CDs with the program on them I can't find. And number three, the new computer doesn't have a CD drive or DVD drive at all. So yeah. Oh, and another program I use for my other job, Substance Painter, Filter Forge no longer supports Photoshop CS3. So yeah. Well, did that answer your question, Christopher? I should note. Let's grab these guys. Okay, going back to the figures. My orcs are not that much taller than my human-sized figures, but they're a lot stockier, a lot heavier looking. They're also on a slightly taller base, so if you choose the textured base. My orcs have, the bases are separate. I mean, I have a round flat base, like this little gladiator's using. That way you can put whatever you want on that base. Or you can use one of the textured bases. Now the tufts of grass are not part of the base, but I designed them to try to make them look as much like, well, this one's probably the best option for showing it off, as much like ruins in the middle of a badlands. You know? I mean, come on. Yeah, there we go. The tufts of grass are not part of it. That was something I added on. Or you can use your own bases, whatever bases you want to use. Hello, Mark. Oh, come on. Stupid autofocus. There we go. Yeah, Mark, you missed the entirety about how I detailed the faces to make them a bit more, you know, added the color and things like that. I mean, like I said before, you know, when you've got, oh, come on, don't do this. You know, head like that. How it's got the cheeks and the nose are a little bit redder, the lips are a good bit redder, and the chin and jaw are more blue. Huh. It's a sunny day. They're both feeling lazy. What's odd about him, his belly turned white. The bottom back of his belly turned white about the time he got full grown. But he's otherwise just straight up a black cat with gold eyes. Red eyes give the feel of evil. That's why vampires are portrayed with red eyes. Because it's color of blood. It's the color that you don't see in nature, that bright red. It's, you know, it's also, with respect to orcs, it's the opposite on the color wheel, green and red. So, you know, a lot more contrast. Black eyes on a miniature vanish. They look like they don't have eyes. It looks like it's just an even darker shadow in the eye socket. It just looks like they're blind. I mean, it ends up looking like that. A hollow, empty eye socket. Oh, so you mean like gray? Again, it would still dark eyes of any shade would blend in with the eye socket. Bright white almost looks unpainted. Red gives a nice brilliant contrast and gives that feeling of evil for orcs. It's a nice contrast, red versus green. If you've got blue orcs, give them orange eyes. If you've got red-skinned orcs, give them sickly, bile-like green eyes. You know, the green eyes. It's also to make them more inhuman. You know, make them less relatable. This is what we're used to looking at. Slightly pinkish eye whites with a dark rim, a ring of color, and a pupil. That's what we're used to looking at. Or for someone with really, really dark brown eyes, it might just look like a black dot. You know. Oh well. And on miniatures, you don't really need to paint all that detail. Just white, a little dot of like a dark gray or a dark blue to give the impression of blue eyes or gray eyes or brown eyes. Yeah. Now, as to your question about eyes, something that's becoming kind of common in a lot of anime, of all things. Again, red is the unnatural color. But like I was saying, something that's becoming popular in anime. Okay, the shade of the lip. Okay, the reason I did that, humans associate a ruddier color with life. Because if you are dead, you are pale. By tinting the cheeks and the nose and the lip towards red, just tinting, we're giving a bit more color variation in the face. And we're also making them look more alive and less zombie. And with more color variation, it's more interesting to look at than just a flat green. No matter how well shaded, flat green will be more boring than giving it like a hint of red here, a hint of blue here, maybe even a slightly yellower forehead. Let me see if I can pull up. There's a picture I have. Let me see if I can pull it up. Oh. No. That's not it. I'm trying to find a picture. No, I've got a picture of the color temperatures of the human face somewhere. So, if I can sucker. If I can find that sucker, I'll post it in on my pics in here. All right, let's see what we have. Nope. Let's see. No, I'm having trouble finding it. Let's see if I can find... See, the thing is, it looks brownish red, but if we actually took a sample of the photo, it's actually like a very dark... It turns into a dark olive. Let's see, do I have it? Oh, I know where it is. And that file, view large icons. Oh yeah, there's any number of potential bloods. Orcs might have green blood. It's just that by using this reddish tint, it tricks the human eye. Humans are used to the idea of, the redder shades being more alive. Here it is, color zones of the face. This is what humans are used to seeing. It's infinitely more subtle in the real world than it is in this picture. This is heavily exaggerated. But areas with a heavier bone or fatty connection, like right across the forehead, tend to be more yellow. Areas where capillaries are closer to the skin tend to be more red. And areas that tend to grow more hair tend to be, well, cooler, a cooler temperature. And as you can see, like this area here has a little bit more fat, so it tends to be a bit more of the yellow. This is a combination of the capillary, so it's kind of an orange. And this area gets a little bit desaturated because of the lack of blood flow directly above the nose. Now, Tolkien's orcs actually would have, they say they have black blood. It's actually red blood, very, very dark. Because Tolkien's orcs are elves that have been twisted and warped and driven insane. And according to Tolkien, orcs don't reproduce. Every orc that is alive is an elf that was captured and twisted. He captured entire nations. Orcs, however, have green blood. Okay, so anyway, the color of the blood has nothing to do with this. The red across the nose and cheeks and lip is to trick the human eye. Humans are prejudiced towards human skin shades and what human skins do. When we blush, we turn redder. We have where our capillaries are closer to the surface, we have redder skin. Where bone and fat is closer to the surface, we have yellower skin. That sort of thing. Battle scars, there's two kinds of scars. The first type of scar is a scar that mounds up, and they tend to be more reddish because they tend to have a lot of blood vessels flowing through them. The second is a scar that digs in, like a Heidelberg scar. That's the scar that comes down like that. And those tend to pucker in, and they are often more pale. And then some scars actually will be more pale under normal circumstances, but when you get angry or inflamed or getting ready to fight, they turn more red. I actually have a tiny little scar right here that an ex-girlfriend once joked was my mood detector. Because normally it's a lot paler than everything around it. But if I'm upset for some reason, it turns red. Well, not red, but it turns slightly darker than the surrounding skin. But basically, it's either darker, and if it is darker, it's more red, or it's lighter than the surrounding skin. On miniatures, it's probably best just to go ahead and go with a darker shade. Heck, just where is it? You could just use a little bit of red tone over it, or the Viejo red wash. Just a little bit. Just not enough to go completely around it, just enough to pick out that detail. Maybe if you're doing like a large bust, you could also make the center of it a little bit yellower. Tint it towards yellow. Just not a lot. Not a lot. I mean, one of the paints I hate the most. Where is it? Here it is. Why does everyone insist on making elven flesh goldenrod colored? It fits almost perfectly. Right in there. It's a little bit yellower than the orange. No, the orange. But yeah, it's not a flesh tone, it's goldenrod. It's not an elf color. Don't make it that yellow. Make it in between that shade and skin. What do you want? What are you doing? Yeah. Anyway, it's 2:55, so I'm going bye-bye. As usual, I'm going to hold my hand up here. I'm going to count down from 5 to 1. When I get to 1, I'm going to go and say something. No, when I get to 1, I'm going to say something goofy. Then go. And when I see the then I'm going to log out. All right. Now, like I said, tonight I'm going to be sculpting my preferred painting practice miniature. Okay. So, that's going to be 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Oi, mates, let's go and prepare for war!